2017 carried fresh new energy that so many of us longed for. After having only just survived the annihilation that was 2016, for me, that is. On New Year's Eve, right before welcoming 2017 with open arms, I took a deep breath, said a gratitude prayer, and wrote my list of intentions for the promising year ahead. The year ahead was meant to be one of those years people would write whole self help books about. Little did I know it would become the preface to my own spiritual demolition. As everyone talked about new energy, fresh hope, and new beginnings, I welcomed in the new year from my slumber, falling asleep with my gratitude list half written. I'd just had major surgery and then post surgery complications, then a corrective surgery to fix the surgery. I was exhausted. Fair. I had my sights set on 2017. It was going to be my year. Surely the universe would give me a break. Cute. On New Year's Day, I found myself in the emergency room at Bateman's Bay with chest pain, panic, and still fresh surgery scars throbbing in sync with my terror. 3 days in emergency later, plus more hospital stints in Canberra, and I realised the tone had been set. 2017 had entered the chat, and it was about to get unhinged. Admitting it wasn't the best start, I kept my mantra on repeat. Nothing was going to get me down. The first of the first had failed to launch, but my hashtag life goals energy was strong. I mean, what else could go wrong, right? 2016 had chewed me up and spat me out relentlessly. If I could survive that and live to tell the tale, then 2017 was going to be a stroll on the beach. Little did I know. 2016 Cristina liked to think she was spiritually enlightened, growing up in a home where meditation was a daily non-negotiable and dinner conversations were usually wackier than an episode of The X-Files. I was born into being awake. Spirituality was as natural as breathing. It was not learned, it was rather inherited. From a very young age, I knew I was different from other kids. I knew things I shouldn't have necessarily known or I couldn't have known. It had its benefits and its challenges. Even though I had sight, some parts of spirituality were confronting for my young mind. So I decided to educate myself. I read books. I asked thousands of questions. I spoke at length with family and friends that I trusted. I ended up knowing more about spirituality and the afterlife, universal law, if you will, than I did about primary school English and math. My parents probably should have enrolled me in the spiritual equivalent of Hogwarts in the late 80s, if such a thing had existed. When I reached my 20s, the cray-cray picked up speed. I had only ever scratched the surface of my journey. So to prepare myself spiritually, I continued to enroll in every course I could, and I sought out people with similar beliefs. I'd heard the term spiritual awakening, but never thought much of it because I firmly believed you couldn't wake up to something you were born living, right? But even with all that wisdom, I still had no idea what was coming. Even as an oracle then, as an adult, I still was unable to see or have foresight about what was about to hit my way. The beginning of 2017, following all the shit show that was 2016, had me reflecting on the beliefs that I had already done the hard stuff. Divorce, depression, weight battles, health issues, emotional chaos, heartbreaks, bouts of sadness that could swallow a person whole. I honestly believed I could survive anything as I had done my time. My cousin and I always had deep spiritual conversations. Talking about leaning on ascended masters rather for respite was about as normal as having a Vegemite Sambo for lunch. I joked with her that I was planning to submit a request to the Hindu goddess Kali because I was so done with the lack of progress in my life. I needed Kali to come in and wreck it Ralph style and give me a clean slate. How bad could it be? I laughed as we spoke. Well, as I would soon come to learn, it got a whole lot worse. I stood so firm in the belief that life couldn't get any worse that asking Carly for a push felt like the miracle I didn't know I needed. And even after major surgery triggered a blood clot in my left lung, leading to pleurisy, pain so excruciating it felt like suffocating while still breathing, and then having to go through corrective surgery after because my wound stitches vanished within 4 days, leaving a gaping hole bigger than the one I was sitting in emotionally. I still thought it was a good idea to ask for a spiritual shove. After all, I was sitting in absolute darkness, in pain and despair. And I was thinking if the clock didn't take me out, the depressive spiral would have. So, what was there to lose? Reflecting over the past year made me realize I was no more exempt from spiritual awakening than I was from paying taxes. I'd been pushed so far past breaking point that my surroundings no longer felt recognizable. A scenario so foreign, I couldn't have dreamed it up in my worst nightmares. So naturally, I took a deep breath and proceeded with my email to Carly. Dear Carly, I know you're a busy woman and all, but I just really need your help right now, please. Shit's been really shit for way too long, and I can't seem to catch a break. Please, girl, please do me a solid and help a sister out. XOXO, Cristina. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, prepared me for what Carly had in mind. The first 6 months of the year were non-stop demolition. I was forced to start over in almost every aspect of my life. The health scares that almost ended me continued. Our long-term relationship cracking open, exposing childhood wounds in a fully grown man who had never really faced them, and the dysfunction of it all ultimately leading to the end of our love. And as a result, yet another house move. Then the sudden and tragic passing of a friend who was only 33, a bright, charismatic soul I'd met in the workplace who lit up every hallway she walked through. Her life was stolen in an instant. She was one of the innocent victims of the Burke Street tragedy in Melbourne in the first month of 2017. It was a brutal reminder of how fragile everything is and how deeply unfair the world can be when beauty is taken before its time. Then came a best friend of 10 years, ghosting our friendship via text, deciding she'd had enough with no further explanation for throwing our solid BFF stamp straight in the bin. My parents then officially announcing their divorce after 40 years, which, to be fair, was about 15 years late. Again, the realization that my day job no longer fit and that solo parenting kids while juggling multiple undiagnosed conditions was going to be my next full-time job. And in the middle of all that, a hysterectomy looming, because apparently my internal lady bits were also going to be part of Carly's cull. It was as if Carly had dumped my entire life on a table and said, nope, try again, and harder this time. I was dismantled in every way a person could be dismantled, emotionally, physically, spiritually, logistically. I was grief, chaos, confusion, and exhaustion all at once. But somehow I was still breathing, just thanks to that fucking blood clot. By the time it came to welcome 2018, I was just as confused as the next person about how I remained standing. And somehow, through all of it, gratitude kept bleeding through the cracks as my much needed reminder that I was actually still here, Earthside. Despite everything, I felt it. My heart was grateful. Grateful for my family that carried me when I couldn't stand for myself. Grateful for my kids that kept me grounded. Grateful for the people who showed up for me and all the new faces that had become friends that year. Grateful for having known my incredibly beautiful friend who was taken too soon. Grateful for the gift of life and to still be breathing, and grateful for the lessons that were disguised as disasters. Looking back, 2017 was the closest thing to a full blown spiritual awakening, if I've ever had one. Not the Instagram kind with Palo Santo and soft music and some candles or sage all up in your face, but the real one, the brutal one, the one that drags you through darkness until you stop pretending you're fine. When I finally reached the end of the year, bruised but not fully broken, I understood something I hadn't been able to see while it felt like I was drowning. When life burns everything down, it's not trying to hurt you, it's trying to free you. And 2017 freed me by force. So I filled up my heart with hope for 2018, looked up to the skies, and high fived the universe. Because when it feels like the end, it's only ever the beginning. So I had to keep the faith.